Dear Professor Putnam, it's a great honor and pleasure to welcome you here. We, the faculty and the students of political science, are frankly delighted to have you here, and thank you very much for receiving our degree, for giving this fantastic presentation, so clear, transparent, and profound together, a rare combination among academicians, as you know better than me, and to have you as a new member in our community. In this case, we will be particularly tolerant and liberal. And if you want, you will be a new hyphenated Italian. You will be the Americo-Italian member of our department. Thank you for being here. And so, I mean, at least there is something new in your presence here. And this is an academic ceremony. All ceremonies are formal. Academic ceremonies are more formal than the average, are super formal or hyper formal. Notwithstanding this premise, frankly, I insist on the fact that this is not only formal. Formal is important. With your terminology, I would say it's a significant part of the social capital. But this is not only formal. This is substantial and felt. Because we, the students at the Faculty of Political Science, we care about your research, your scientific personality. My colleague Sergio Fabbrini presented before your career and your awards, but there is something he stressed, and I think it's so important. You are really an exemplar scholar for a young political scientist, an exemplar scholar, in the sense that you were able to put together different tools to argue in favor of a better world. And these tools range from game theory to sociology, from political theory to empirical research. This is so important for us, for our students, for our future. And of course, you give also a fundamental contribution to our own understanding of our own country, which is so rare. I mean, we are jealous of Italy. I mean, Italians traditionally are jealous. We are jealous of our country. So the fact that we needed a foreigner to understand better ourselves was difficult to accept. And in your case, I would say it was accepted exactly because it was a great contribution. So we are jealous, but not stupid. Let's hope so, at least. In the long run, we understand. I must say, I remember that I reviewed your book on an Italian newspaper, being a Southerner, meridionale, as you know, and being Napolitan, it was so difficult to accept the idea that my grandfathers did not have a good communal performance, so were unable to build a social capital able to make democracy through him. I mean, of course I knew that we were in desperate conditions, but the fact that I couldn't do anything about that was so sorry. You spoke about the positive role of religion. I agree with you. I mean, civil rights in America and the anti-abolitionist movement are two fundamental exemplars. Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King are pivotal names to understand why religion is important. And there are a lot of research on this. I mean, including a lot of research done on, for instance, German Nazi country during the 30s and the people that helped Jews in that period. And the majority of them were religious people. Sometimes the intolerable is better taken by people who are less liberal but more profoundly tied to basic principles, like religious people often are. But I have a, half surprise for you. Half surprise because I told you before. An unsuspectable advocate of the formidable role of religion within the American civilization. Given that this is not a mystery story, I will tell you the name. I will tell you, told you the name of this person. Is the former Iranian President Khatami. I remember I was Cambridge, US, when I got this fantastic interview that Khatami gave at CNN. He said that the best way to understand and describe, and I'm quoting, the American society is the one given by the French sociologist, which is controversial, Alexis de Tocqueville. And he said also that the most important thing to understand America is that American civilization found religion as a basis for its growth, and that, therefore, in US, liberty and faith never clash. Liberty and faith never clash. So, I mean, it was a fantastic event. I remember Katami taking the book from underneath his black dress and exposing it to CNN, which is rather unusual. It's unpopular. Nobody did before, and I think afterward. It was fantastic. The courage he had to speak, because the question of the journalist, of course, was, President Katami, don't you think there is too much religion in politics in your country? And says, no, but religion in politics is in the United States. It's the cement of this society. So I think that it was fantastic. But and this is a problem with the public role of religion, I mean, we could not say the same for what's happening now in Iran. So it's true that sometimes religion is helpful, like the civil rights movements in America during the 60s, but sometimes it is not, like now in Iran, and you said this before, and Sergio too said this before. Now the problem is, given that we have, on one end, the social capital, widespread religion, and on the other hand, liberal democratic institutions, what comes first? Because if religion can be helpful or damaging, can be good or bad, perhaps it's helpful in America and not in Iran, because institutions are more important than one is supposed to admit. I mean, of course, the problem, I suppose, the main problem of your books, ranging from Bowling Alone to Make Democracy Work to the American Grace, is the dialectics between institutions and civic culture or social capital. But your thesis, I mean, seems to be that social capital is the most important element within this dialectic. And this was, when presented first time, I think, a true revolution within the neo-institutionalist camp. People like Williamson or North gave the basis of what we call neo-institutionalism, and they were not prepared to say that the social capital was so important as you, in some way, discovered and made popular among us. So the problem is the interface, dialectics between liberal democratic institutions, in the case of Europe and the United States, and religions. But let's think why we liberals usually are institutionalists. I think because we are normative institutionalists, in the sense that we think that if we want to speak of reforming a society, we should prepare the field by arguing that something must be changed. And of course you can say, please do change your institutions, but it's very difficult to say, please do change your civic culture. I mean, it's like the reaction to your book, the first reaction to your book, was a kind of so what reaction. I mean, I'm Napolitan. My tradition is not inspired by a strong tradition of a civic culture, of course, I mean, I would say. But now, should I react to this, or should I accept this? I suppose I should react to this. And so I need reform. And how, being liberal, I imagine reform? I think I imagine reform in terms of voluntariness and institutions. Let's try to do something for the better. And of course, I cannot change the civic culture of my grandfathers. What can I auspicate and do is to try to implement a new view of institutions that in the long run will change the civic culture. Or at least, I must think that hopefully institutions do count. So, I mean, but it's not just Southern Italy. Think of China. Let's assume that we Westerners can have a role for helping Chinese people to get more rights and more democratic opportunities. could we say to them, please change your social capital? Please modify your civic culture? Of course we cannot. I mean, it's their social capital. What can we say to them with, I don't think, many hopes of success, but what we can say to them is, please, reform your constitutional tradition, put more rights in the agenda, take seriously human rights, and so on. So the problem is here evident, and without need to recall particular examples. In many times, we do not have the time to think in terms of social capital, whereas we have the time for thinking in terms of reform of institutions, of institutional reform. This would mean that sometimes liberal pluralism and institutionalized democracy are more important than social capital, or at least that dialect is very complex. But of course, I think there is also the opposite option. And I think that the best example we can give of a situation which favors more your own position, if I understand it well, is what's happening now in North Africa, the turmoil in the Arab world that was so innovative and surprising for all of us. And there were plenty of journalists, but also CIA agents there, and nobody understood what was happening in Egypt and Tunisia, to not speak of Libya. Now, in this case, I think that to speak of social capital is very helpful, because what happened was in some way a revolution within social capital. We do not know exactly why. Perhaps the combination of the economic crisis, new media, foreign inspiration, and so on, made possible to change radically from within the social capital of those countries. I think that this is a very important statement, because it's just the opposite of the Bush doctrine, so to say. What we have lost in terms of dialogical possibilities in the Arab world with the Iraq intervention in 2003 is enormous. And perhaps now we have time to recuperate. And to do that, toward a future that we mostly ignore, we must be sensitive and sensible and try to hear. And try to hear is in some way giving the widest possible logical space to the social capital. So, I mean, speaking of the classical problems we are confronted with another civic and religious tradition, like is the Islam in the Arab world. We have a problem concerning the most important human rights. We have a problem concerning the way in which democracy itself is conceived. We have problems, of course, with gender discrimination, and we have problems, basically, for the problem itself concerning the relations between democracy and religion. My suggestion is that your thesis helps a lot to be confronted with these problems. Helps a lot because it avoids risk of indulging in the temptation to intervene and to change from here there. We must relocate the destiny of these countries where it is. And so we must hear what they do. We must, of course, support. But after having understood, which is not easy, what's happening there. So I think that here, the emphasis on social capital is particularly significant because our attitude must be of respect, patience, and here, instead than intervening. But that, what I say, are just some random comments. The basic idea was to emphasize something out your message. Of course, there was no time to discuss seriously your message, and probably I misinterpreted it here and there. But this was done with the maximum intellectual respect and with fundamental scientific admiration. I think that your visit here is not the last step. I mean, it's the first of a long percourse together. I hope so. And I hope again that your visit here, with its intellectual fallout, will leave an impressive footprint for all of us. Thank you very much for being here. That was wrong.
No, on the contrary. First of all, I thank you very much for those comments and the thoughtful spirit that you delivered them. And I agree with you completely that there is an interesting dialogue between institutionalists and people who have my view about social capital or civic culture. I only wanted to correct one, from my point of view, one misunderstanding, and that is that if you believe in social capital, you believe that nothing can be done, that is, that you should not be active. That's exactly the opposite of my position. My position is that the reason to understand the importance of social capital is so that you can make change. And all of my work for the last 20 years, all of my work for the last 20 years has been directed. I'm a civic and social and political activist. The reason that I know Obama well is because he and I have worked together, even before he was famous, on social activism. And so if I were living in Naples or in Lucania or in Chicago, the last thing that I would do is to say, pazienza. I would say, impazienza. We need now to be reconstructing the basis of a civic society in Chicago, in New Orleans, and in the Mezzogiorno.
Okay. Let's hope so.